Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. I am Amanda.
I'm Laura.
And I'm Kendra.
And today we are going to do part 2 of our Blue Zones book club. Last time we talked about Sardinia, and today we are going to talk about Nicoya, Costa Rica. We're doing this because we care about you and we want you to live better and longer. So you spend all of your time taking care of others, and you can only be your best when you're taking care of you too. And actually, we just care more about you anyway. So that's just selfishly.
Facts.
We think you're
Facts.
pretty great people. So before we start, we aren't doctors. We aren't your medical doctor.
Wait, we are doctors.
Oh, is that what I said? Okay. So before we start, we are doctors, but we aren't your doctor. Sorry. Just like blasting through this thing. This is not medical advice. This is just purely educational because it's interesting.
That's awesome. Yes, we are doctors. That's funny.
Yes.
And we do care about you, actually. And this is a very unique situation. These blue zones, and talking about them is interesting because how we introed part 1 was we have B as in billions of dollars spent in the industry of health and wellness, like, exercise, supplements, nutrients, vitamins, all the things saying that take this, you're going to run faster, work hard, work smarter, all the things and all these empty promises. And really, guys, the biggest thing is just to model ourselves after some of these communities that are like doing nothing but living their everyday lives, not adding anything, not taking anything away, but just focusing on what it does to create not only community, but eat foods that I love Dr. Amen. He says, eat foods that love you back. So they definitely eat foods that love them back. And they are keeping themselves sharp by getting outside, experiencing nature, by sleeping well, by keeping active and movement in their brains going and, continuing to solve complex, functions and make decisions and do all the things. And, all of that together means that they're not really a burden on their families like we are in the US, and with all the, millions and billions of dollars spent on long-term acute care and nursing homes. That has a place. But what if you were making it to a centenarian and still walking on your own, balancing your own checkbook, handling all your affairs, everything? That is not burdensome to your family. And you're contributing just as much to the community as they are to you. So that has to be something that, reading these books and discovering these tight-knit communities, we definitely can learn quite a bit from them. So once again, just to recap, we are covering the series, The Blue Zone, Secrets for Living Longer, Lessons from the Healthiest Places on Earth. And the author of this wrote a book, but there's also a Netflix series. So you Netflix binge watchers, there's a 4-part series on Netflix you can check out. But basically, the author, Dan Buettner, studied these communities called Blue Zones, which means that the per capita amount of people, centenarians in that area. So they have a denser population of centenarians plus, because it's not just reaching 100. I mean, they're surpassing 100, but they have more per capita centenarians in that area than anywhere else. And so it's interesting that we can pinpoint these communities and really study what they do, how they live, what their communities are like. So he published this book out of studying these communities, and we're going to travel to Costa Rica today and talk about them. Yoo-hoo! So and we mentioned this last time, while true genetics do play a role, it really only counts for about 1/4 of the differences in longevity between people. So whereas people are like, oh, they just have great genes or they just have a family line with great genetics, that really doesn't account for a lot of what we're going to talk about. And considering that only 1/4, so there's 3/4 of it left to your what we call epigenetic, or the environment for which you were raised and the learned behaviors that you have. So just to recap, the Blue Zones eat a whole food, plant-forward diet. Instead of going to the gym and killing it 3 to 4 days a week, they just move naturally and frequently throughout the day. So they walk everywhere. And in some of these communities, there's steep inclines. They just walk everywhere. They walk to the store. They walk to see their neighbors. They do a lot of their jobs on a daily basis are outside, and it's a lot of walking. The shepherding, they mention that they walk 5 to 6 miles per day. So They also have a very keen sense of community. They tend to honor and keep their elders close. There's no SNFs or long-term acute care facilities in these areas. They have great support, social support systems, and they maintain a sense of purpose. And that's multi-generational. So even the younger generations that are taken care of by some of the older generations, they hand down this generational sense of purpose, that they're all very clear on the role that they play in this process, and they hand it down. And those people feel honored, the older generations, to be taking care of the younger generations, and vice versa. The younger generations feel honored to be able to care for these centenarians. So we've talked about this before, how important community is, that isolation and loneliness are an independent risk factor for coronary artery disease, for cardiovascular disease, for a ton of things. So we're saying it again, community is important. People, find your people and get together with them and do it intentionally. It makes a difference.
Yeah. And the disclaimer, that doesn't mean if you have toxic relatives that you need to do that.
Yeah, this is not only family of origin. Yeah, this can be your people, like really finding your people and your community.
Right. I'd say toxic family members probably shorten your life.
Oh, 100%.
Definitely don't help you want to live to 100. Anyway, so we talked about Sardinia last time. What were you going to say, Amanda?
Side note, just avoid toxins of all sorts, including people.
Yes. Last time we talked about Sardinia, so we're going to talk about Nicoya, Costa Rica. Now, this blue zone is a 30-mile-long strip in the Nicoya Peninsula of northwest Costa Rica. A Nicoyan man has twice the chance of a U.S. man to live until 90, despite using 1/10 of the health expenditures per person in Costa Rica. That's kind of mind-blowing. And it's felt that the longevity of these people is a blend of genetics, traditional foods, effective public health systems, tight family bonds, and active lifestyle, faith in God, and sunny, dry environment. You know, that sunny, dry environment, there's something to that. I just feel better when I go to someplace sunny and dry as opposed to my own beloved humid and hot place. So this all sounds familiar. It's a lot of the same stuff that was happening in Sardinia, the traditional foods and active lifestyle and tight family bonds. So until recently, Nicoya was one of the most isolated parts of Costa Rica. And just like Sardinia, this had helped preserve its traditional way of life. Traditionally, men here worked as ranch hands or farmers, usually in extreme poverty. Their low-calorie, low-fat, plant-based diet is influenced by the indigenous people of the area, the Chorotega. So it sounds similar to that peasant diet that the people in Sardinia were enjoying. Again, you don't have to be rich to live to 100. In fact, maybe living a little bit more modestly will help us live longer. The cornerstone of the diet is the three sisters: beans, corn, and squash. You know, that's called the three sisters because they grow them together in a little teepee-like formation. So today, rice has largely replaced the squash, but the combination still provides all 9 amino acids required by our bodies. And the average Nicoyan consumes about 1,800 calories a day, which is 1/4 less than the typical American. The way they prepare their corn tortillas is by soaking the corn in lime and their hard or the calcium-rich water that they have there. It infuses the corn with 7.5 times more calcium than normal, and it unlocks amino acids that would otherwise not be available for digestion in the corn. They think by preparing the corn this way, it explains why people almost never got rickets and rarely had fractures we frequently see in older people. I would have to think that being outside in the sunny environment would also help prevent the rickets.
Incidentally, yes.
Incidentally.
I would think so.
I would think that rickets would be probably pretty rare in Costa Rica, but maybe I'm wrong. So
every
Costa Ricans,
every once in a while, old Dan throws a little fact in the book that I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? I don't know.
Right.
Anywho, it's just a book review. Let's go.
It's a book review. There's some helpful information. Take what you will. So Costa Ricans as a whole have telomeres that would be associated with people 7 years younger. And their centenarians' telomeres are 13 years younger. Strangely, in Costa Rica, the lower the household income, the better the telomeres. Isn't that fascinating? So
Mm-hmm.
my previous supposition was correct, that being poorer there makes you live longer. That's fascinating. So possibly it's because diet can influence epigenetics, especially a fiber and plant forward diet, which is more typical in poverty. Stress and social connections also have an impact. Families are supposed to relieve stress and give you purpose and a positive outlook. We know that's not always the case,
Mm-hmm.
but for those who do experience that, it is beneficial for their health. And Nicoyans in general were less likely than other Costa Ricans to live alone. We've mentioned before, living alone doesn't necessarily mean loneliness, but if we're living alone in loneliness, that is definitely a risk factor for early death. So those who did live alone had their telomere advantage vanish. So it's just so amazing what community can do for us. The public health care system in Costa Rica, they have a rural health care system where small teams, including a physician, nurse, a record keeper, and a trained health worker, are assigned to a specific geographic population to care for between 2,500 to 4,000 inhabitants. Each household gets at least one visit per year, and the goal is prevention to provide health education, a clean water supply, and vaccines. They are proactive and keep track of anyone who has chronic disease, disability, or is elderly and lives alone. Since they started this program, deaths from communicable disease have fallen by 94%. I mean, that's a lot.
It's pretty good.
Infant mortality has dropped by a factor of 7, and life expectancy has risen from 66 to 80. I'm just wondering what the communicable disease, I have to believe it was some diarrheal illness, like if they're teaching about sanitation, and I wouldn't have thought it would be measles, and vaccinations, I guess, would be helping them.
Yeah,
Well,
I imagine if they're providing immunizations, because it says infant mortality dropped, so it may be that, like the county health department providing immunizations.
So the most random trauma credit I ever got was about like refugee camps. I don't even know why that qualified for a trauma credit, but the only thing I learned from that was that number one cause of death was diarrheal illness or cholera or whatever it was. Yeah. Number two is measles. So it's the one vaccine that the World Health Organization goes into these refugee camps and tries to get them immunized for measles. So that might be.
So maybe it was measles.
Who knows?
So incredibly. So while the healthcare system has improved life for Costa Ricans, the blue zone in Nicoya is shrinking because of improved communication with the outside world. Tourism, the invasion of junk food, and social media. But we can learn the lessons while we can and try to live a little bit more that modest lifestyle with that plant-forward diet and hold tight to our non-toxic relatives.
Do some weeding out. Every good garden, you pull the weeds, right?
Yes.
So one thing that I think is interesting about their public health system is they go to the people, whereas we are particularly bad for somebody who's in poverty in these impoverished areas. We tend to not have clinics. We tend to make them come to us during operating hours. We make it particularly difficult for the most at risk to get the help that they need. So it's interesting that they pay a visit to people where they are and have so much success with that. So some takeaways from Nicoya are, number one, have a plan de vida, which is, again, we see that the centenarians still have a strong sense of purpose. He talks about one of the people that he met was over 100 and was still hopping up on a horse and rounding up the cattle every day, like at 4 a.m.
Whoa.
And then, it was
That's
10
incredible.
a.m. and he stopped. They feel needed and they want to contribute. So I know, back in the day, I'd be like, if I can just reach to retirement. Okay, fine. But then have a plan to continue to have a sense of purpose. Number two, drink hard water. That was one thing that was unique about this area is their water has a really high calcium content. And maybe that helps contribute to strong bones and lower cardiovascular risk. These are just, it's hard to do a study on it. It's just some things to think about. Keep a focus on family. Many live multi-generationally, like we talked about, and provide each other support, purpose, and belonging. Number 4, eat a light dinner. Nicoyans eat relatively fewer calories than most Americans and eat just a light dinner in the early evening. And Nicoyan centenarians typically ate the traditional Three Sisters diet, which is beans, corn, and squash. That was one thing. I went to Mesa Verde trying to hit some national parks, and that was also what that indigenous community ate, was beans, corn, and squash, sometimes turkey. But I mean, it's passed through forever. So like clearly societies do well that eat heavy on those sorts of things. And then the corn, I mean, not to get graphic, but sometimes we can't always break down the corn, but they're turning it into those corn tortillas with the special soaks that they do with their hard water. Okay, moving on from poop talk. We had number five is maintain a social network. We see this over and over again. In Nicoya, neighbors frequently visit each other. They hold space for each other to laugh and appreciate what they have. And then number 6, keep hard at work. Centenarians there continue to do gardening, meaningful work, cook, and care for their grandchildren. Number 7, get some sensible sun. As you might imagine, in Costa Rica, they get outside a lot. So the vitamin D they generate from this might help fight off the osteoporosis and heart disease. We're not suggesting tanning beds and sunburns here. Be sensible. But 15 or 20 minutes of exposure on your arms and legs can help supplement your diet. But certainly have a vitamin D level checked, because the thinking is that over the 35th latitude, which is approximately Atlanta, Georgia, and north of that, during the months of November to February, doesn't have enough UVB rays to convert with your own skin. So just get it checked. And then number 8, embrace a common history. Nicoyans have roots in the indigenous Chorotega, and their traditions keep them relatively free of stress. Their traditional diet of fortified corn and beans may be the best nutritional combo for longevity around the world.
Yeah. I want to just add one more little plug for the getting your vitamin D level checked, especially if you're listening to this podcast because you're experiencing burnout. If you have a low vitamin D level, it is going to be very hard to be at your emotional best. Vitamin D affects every process in our body. It reduces your risk for diabetes, hypertension, cancer.
MS.
I had gestational diabetes with one of my pregnancies, and I read that vitamin D reduces that. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have this with all of them. No, I started taking vitamin D. I never had any other problems with it again. It helps reduce preeclampsia. I mean, it's magical. It's magical. So please make sure you have enough.
On behalf of the nephrologists watching, though, do realize you can get toxic, so please get that level checked. Yeah. Susan Woody K was telling us, like, oh my gosh, you can go nuts. You can go nuts on vitamin D if you're just mainlining it, so just be sensible.
Yes.
Yes, of course. All of these things are in a good ratio, moderation, use your brain. This is not that we grab on one of these and just go nuts. We are just simply providing information, and take it for what it's worth. But what a good, I'm thinking, ladies, that our next biz retreat, I'm thinking Sardinia, maybe Costa Rica. Let's get it down on the books.
Yeah.
Let's get it on the books. Let's just do a little R&D, I think. So, And we want to remind you, listeners out there, help us help you. Please leave a review. Help us to get our podcast out there. You guys are getting so much out of it. So let's get the word out so other physicians can find us and enjoy this lovely podcast, and leave a review so we go to the top of the list. And we want you to check out our new version of our online course, Wellness 911. We just launched recently. So go to our website, www.thewholephysician.com, to get more information. We take demoralized doctors from fried to fantastic with our easy and evidence-based Wellness 911 program. Until next time, you are whole, you are a gift to medicine, and the work you do matters.